watching GearZ, brought to you by LNC Truck. Keep them on the road.
You know, one thing that is almost always overlooked when people get into building custom vehicles is the fact that the little detail work a lot of times is more difficult and time-consuming than the big stuff. For example, stuffing another engine into a vehicle, that's pretty straightforward. But getting that engine all hooked up and working right, that's where all your time's gonna go. And that's why we get a ton of questions of people saying, what parts do I buy to do this? How do I make them all work together? And how do I modify them if I have to? Those are good questions. Because if you change the parameter of the vehicle at all, which is what we do, well, you can rest assured that those parts are probably not gonna bolt right in. And the burden falls on you to make it all work. So that's what we're going to show you how to do today. Okay, first things first. If you're trying to do a major project and you don't have a way to keep it organized with something like our planning book, you are asking for trouble, because there is no way you're going to remember all the parts and part numbers of everything you're putting on. I know you think you will, but you won't. So get that established first, because you're going to reference back to that a lot throughout the project. Now, just like the old song says, the parts of a car are also all connected. And the first thing we're going to take a look at is the steering column. Now, it doesn't matter if you're doing a Ford, Chevy, Dodge, or some crazy hot rod creation. These issues are going to come up. Now, all three of these columns come from iDidit, and all of them could be made to fit this car, but there's only one that's the right choice. So let's take a look at them. The first one is a factory replacement for the '67 Mustang. Now notice it has Ford-style wiring, and it's got the area up here for the original Ford-style steering wheel. So if you don't know what kind of wiring you're using or what steering wheel, you can't get a steering column yet. Now, we are not going to use Ford wiring, and we're not using that original wheel, so this one's out. The second column is also a factory replacement for the Mustang, except it has Chevrolet-style wiring and the GM top, so it will fit our aftermarket steering wheel. The only problem with this column is we've modified our steering box. We got rid of it, we put on rack and pinion. So this column is now too long. I need something shorter than stock length, so this one's out. The third one is the universal street rod column. You can get it in the length you need, and as you can see, it's got the Chevrolet wiring and the Chevrolet top, so it will fit the aftermarket wheel. This will be the column that'll fit that car. Now, once you have the column decided, then you can get all of your adapters in your hangers so you can mount it properly. Since we've already mentioned wiring, we might as well just jump into that bundle of snakes right now. Now, just like the steering columns, you can see I've got a whole bunch of wiring harnesses laid out here. All of them come from Painless, and any one of them could be made to fit this project. But you're going to find that there's always one that works the best. You just need to find it. So let's take a look here. The first is a factory replacement harness. Now, this has the right color-coded wiring, the right hookups, everything that you need to just plug it in place of your original harness. If you're doing an original restoration, this is the harness to go. That's not what we're doing, so this one's out. The next one is what they call the Pro Series. Now, this is for somebody that's building a Pro Touring car, which is what this is. So as you can see, it's got a full fuse block, and it's got everything you're going to need to run whatever alternator, whatever setup, the grounding, everything you're going to do. So this is a really nice setup for you hot rod guys. Now, similar to that is the Classic Plus customizable muscle car harness. Now, as you can see, it's got a full fuse block as well, except this one comes through the firewall and has a plug that plugs in the front wiring under the hood, very similar to an OEM deal. So if that's more what you're looking for, this is the harness to go. Now, of these two, this is the best fit for what we're doing here, but we got a problem. We've added in-dash air conditioning, a center console, we have roll bars coming down under the cowl, and I have 4-speed pedals. I don't have a lot of room under the dash for any of this kind of stuff. So we need to look at the remote mount customizable harness. As you can see, it's got the full fuse block, but it also has extra long wires going to each of the sections, so you can mount this fuse block in the trunk, in the console, wherever you want to put it. And that's the kind of deal we're going to have to do on this car. Air conditioning is another big question mark for a lot of people, because companies like Vintage Air, they make direct fit units and they make numerous universal units. And it's up to you to figure out which one's going to work. For example, On the V8 Interceptor, we started with a factory replacement unit because we want to be able to reuse our stock controls. And Vintage Air has a system that will allow you to do this. The problem is, remember, we smoothed the firewall and we recessed it a couple of inches. So there's no way that's just going to bolt in place. Here's how we solved the problem. First, we made a simple bracket that bolts to the firewall and will support the front of the air conditioning unit. Then, to support the rear of the unit, the upper bracket was reshaped and a spacer fabricated to mount it to the stock bracket under the cowl. Now obviously, all of this nice pre-bent tubing that came with the kit, we can't use any of it because we don't want our plumbing to come out through the firewall. That's why we smoothed it down in the first place. And what we do want it to do is come out here and then run down this inner fender so it's all nice and hidden when the car goes back together, which means we need to plumb this thing by hand, and that involves making our own lines and using a bulkhead fitting to come through the firewall. Now, I know this seems like a lot of work, and it is, but that's the kind of project this car is. Everything's custom, everything's smooth, everything's hidden. But what about those projects out there that aren't quite as labor intensive as this? How do you solve these kind of problems on those? Well, let's take a look. Okay, what we have here is an 81 Camaro and an 86 Chevy truck, and both are going to get new steering columns, but for different reasons. The Camaro gets one because we're swapping from an automatic to a stick. The truck's going to get one because we've swapped in a newer automatic transmission with more gears, so we need a different shift column. Now obviously both vehicles are going to get new wiring harnesses, but the truck is going to get an original direct fit style wiring harness because that's the sort of buildup this is. The Camaro is going to get a muscle car Pro Touring style of harness because that's the sort of project this is with the LS swap. Now obviously both vehicles came with factory air, but we junked that, pulled it off, and we're going to replace them with direct fit Vintage Air units because we're not modifying the firewall or under the dash. So you can see it's pretty important to know how you're going to build a vehicle before you start buying parts. Now, for those of you that are building that crazy stuff like old tractors and off-road vehicles and military vehicles and rat rods and that kind of thing, that's what this Snowcat project is for. Because this didn't have a steering column, it didn't have air conditioning, heck, it barely had a wiring harness. So for this, we just need a universal wiring harness. We'll wire this thing up, we'll be good to go.